What's up, everybody? One Fun Guy podcast live in the studio, guys. Tonight, I'm just going to hang out. It's low key. I'm going to get Kelly on. The pod cult is going to be live and going. If you guys haven't tried this new 7-Up Zero Sugar Tropical, it's awesome. I'm like hooked on this. I'm going to share this out, see who else is on. Give me a couple minutes. I'm going to see who else is live. I'm going to share it to a few people. Hopefully, we can get a few of you guys on. Some of the OGs, some of the new ones, who's ever on. It'll be awesome. I'm hoping that everything comes with this, and we have a good, fun live tonight. If you guys like the live, guys, just like it in the comments. We do keep a very active comment group going, so we're all friends here, guys. So if you want to interact with each other in the lives, I really hope that you guys do that. We try to keep things very interactive and very fun here, guys. It doesn't cost anything to hang out with us. We don't ask for gifts. We don't ask you to tap our faces 1,000 times. If you guys like what we're doing, just like the screen. If you want to give us some love, we appreciate it, but we don't ask for it, and we definitely do not require it. So with that being said, we're just here to have fun. We do our show. We're going to be on for about a half an hour or so. Sassy, what's up? So say what's up. If you like the show, guys, just like it. It really helps us out a lot. We really just kind of like to entertain you guys. We're not in it for the money. Hopefully one day we will be, but for right now, we just kind of like hanging out, kind of shooting the shit, kind of doing the thing. We do kind of curse a little bit on this show, so nothing crazy, but like every once in a while, we just, we are adults here and it is an adult show. So, hopefully everybody here that's watching is 18 and over. That's what we like to hope for. But nonetheless, guys, if you like what you see, just feel free to share the show. Like us, comment on us, be interactive in the chat. That's what we're going for here. I'm gonna see if Kelly's on here. I see Juicy Jason is on. Dennis, what's up? If you guys are new here, follow me, guys. I'll follow you back as soon as the live show ends. We're obviously trying to build our team and build our group and build everything else we have. I'm very lucky that I have the followers I do and that the team I do and the content I put out, you guys like and appreciate. That really helps me out. Hopefully I could do the same thing for you guys, try to make content that's fun and enjoyable and that you guys, like hanging out with me and Kelly. When we go live and we just kind of have fun. We don't take ourselves too seriously, guys. We're not in this. I will say this. Kelly is awesome. He is my co-host on the podcast. He's also my friend in person. He's trying to make it in the music business, guys. So if you guys have any connections for him or anywhere to go, he is Arsenic Live. He just dropped a new single. His goal is to put out an EP by Black Friday, which he's going to be able to do for sure. He's already got 4 songs. He probably needs 1 or 2 more. He's just got to put it together. So if anybody is in the music business and knows how to package stuff, John, what's up? If you guys know how to do that, if you could help us out, we'd appreciate it. And kind of go from there. We'll do what we can. We'll see where we can be. And your birthday's on Black Friday. That's awesome. So anyways, guys, if you can really just help him out and if you can guide him on where to go or what to do, I'm sure he would really appreciate it as I do with my stuff. I am One Fun Guy podcast on YouTube. So if you guys can go over there and please subscribe to my channel, that would mean the world to me anyways. I do have the new lighting here, guys, and the lighting behind me. It seems like I found my niche. I did put the black ceiling tiles in a couple bit ago. I do have the Kiss action figures, toys, whatever you want to call them, and the horror stuff. Obviously, you guys know I'm a huge fan of hard rock and heavy metal music. I like horror movies. I like a ton of movies, but horror is my go-to. So now is the season, right? This is it for me. If you guys like horror movies and hard rock and metals too, hard rock and heavy metal too, let me know in the comments, guys, what kind of music you like, what movies you like. I like all kinds of movies. Lisa, what's up? So I just really, like movies in general. It's how I wind down. I enjoy film and filmmaking and film study and stuff like that. I wouldn't say it's a hobby, but I've seen a lot of movies. And I do like all genres of movies. So it really kind of helps me out. Davey, what's up? Mel, what's up? Long time no see, Mel. How are you doing? Mel is OG for me. She's been around since the very beginning. Mel is not from the U.S., but that doesn't matter. She's super cool. And she's been around, like I said, since the beginning. So, Honeybee, what's up? If you're on, say hi. I think I just invited you as a guest. I didn't mean to do that. If you want to come on and say hi to the world, you're free to do that. I didn't mean to do that, but if you get the invite and you want to, Thursday Night Football is very, very good. I'll probably watch some of the game after this. I do have some wrestling to catch up on too. I've just had a super busy week with work, so I haven't spent a whole lot of time watching wrestling. They were in Perth, Australia, the WWE, so I recorded. It was 8 in the morning for us. Obviously, I was at work, so when I got home, it was already over. I think they're back in the U.S. now, so that should be all right for that. I'm going to see, guys, if Kelly is on real quick. He is not. So as soon as he gets on and gets set up, I will have Kelly come on, and we'll talk a little bit about what he's going on, his podcast. Gen78, what's up? If you guys are new here, guys, follow me. I'll follow you back, and we'll kind of going back to bed. I have the flu. All right, Lisa, get better. It's the season. If you need anything, let me know. If I could help in any way. It's really bad. The flu season this year is bad. A lot of people at work have gotten it. So, we'll go from there. All right, perfect. Yeah, so with that being said, guys, just as we start to get into this, world that's a little bit crazy right now and a little bit things are in turmoil. I said it before and I'll say it again, guys, just be kind to each other, right? We're all doing things to better ourselves in our lives. We're all trying to do the things that make us happy. We're all just trying to be successful in our own little universe, right? Whether that means that, you have $1 million in the bank or you have $1 in the bank, that's all pertinent to you. What makes you happy? How are you happy? And don't put anybody down because you think that, they have this awesome life and that they, nobody knows what happens behind closed doors, guys. So just have a little bit of empathy, a little bit of compassion. Just try to be kind, be a good human. It's kind of what I spread as a message, right? Me and Kelly, we differ a lot in a lot of the views that we have politically and a lot of the views that we have, fundamentally. But what brings us together is we're good people. We can talk about it. We can joke about it. We can see each other's sides and have discussions. And that's kind of what we want to do. And that's how we morph this into it, right? Me and Kelly became friends over music and podcasting and talking and working things out. If we were to be in the same group of people, we probably wouldn't have never ever connected. But it's the things that you find that you have the similarities over your differences. And then we don't get mad. Like I don't get mad at Kelly when he cracks a joke at my political views or my religious views or anything like that. And I don't on him. But we do have a mutual understanding. We try to grow from each other, right? We try to learn. Tell me about what you have going on. Why are you, this way? And not this way, but like, why do you see this side of things? And so we try to talk and we have good conversations and we learn a lot from each other and we grow as people. He teaches me a lot about music and a lot about different bands that are out there, and we don't have to agree on everything, but look at the good in people, guys. Don't look at the bad. Don't look at the diversity. We're all human beings, guys. No matter what color you are, no matter what how you look, what your size is, whatever it is, right? We're all people, right? We're all living on this world together, right? We have planet Earth unites us, right? It doesn't matter if you're here in America or you're down in Mexico. I love Mexico. If you're up in Canada, if you're overseas somewhere, we're all people, right? We all need the same basics to survive, right? So let's grow on that. Let's try to find our similarities as opposed to pointing out our differences and then showing, the world how, ugly we could really be, right? We are all people. We're at the end of the day, we're all the same, really, right? We're all brothers and sisters when you think about it, right? It doesn't matter what God you worship or what you believe. We are here on earth together. It is us, right? There's couple billion people that live in the world, right? We're all in this together. We all share the same air. We all need food and water to survive. We're all, how we acquire it and what we do is obviously going to be different, right? The paths that we take. I live in a nice house. I live in a nice area. I'm happy with it. It's not a $40 million mega mansion by any stretch of the imaginations, right? I don't know what I'd do if I had that kind of wealth, but I'm not going to put the guy down that obtained that kind of wealth, right? He checks his bank account, he's got $75, $80 million in it. Awesome, right? He got that somehow. I'm not envious or jealous of him. I'm happy that he obtained that kind of wealth and can live that lifestyle. I have a new truck. It's not anything spectacular, right? But it gets me to point A to point B in some comfort and some fun, right? And that's what I enjoy. So with that being said, we have to stop looking at it as terms of like what is successful, because everybody's successful in their own mind, right? The guy that might be on the corner shaking a can for some change might be the happiest person on the planet, and the guy that lives in that $100 million house in LA might be the most miserable man on the planet. You don't know what people are. We're just all humans trying to navigate this. And I guess my point is just be happy with what you have, be content, and just try to be a good person. Try to see things from the other perspective. Try to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. We all have good days and we all have bad days, right? Joni, welcome. We're all just people on this planet, right? We're all going to face the same fate, right? Someday we're all going to die, right? It's going to happen. Whether it's tomorrow, 20 years, 40 years, 100 years from now, right? That's the one uniting thing, is that nobody's going to beat death. So whether you have $1 to your name or you have $100 million to your name, we're all going to face the same fate one day. It's inevitable. We're all going to be there, right? It's how we lived as people is going to determine where our legacy is on this planet, right? That's the only thing. Like I said, it doesn't matter what religion you practice. It doesn't matter what political side you fall on. We're all people. We all live here. We all have to grow and understand together. And, hopefully one day we all live in peace and harmony, and, we go. That's what we thrive for, right? So we'll get there one day. Judy, what's going on? If you guys are new here, say hi. Welcome in. I'm going to send Kelly the invite here. I'm going to get him on. Just give me a second. Here, live creators. As soon as he pops on, I will get him on. There's his invite right there. I invited him. Nope, not now. What's up, buddy?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. So I was just giving my little speech about how we all live on this planet and we're all one. We need to better ourselves. We're all going to face the same fate. I gave a little insight about our differences, but we're united over music, and we learn from each other and we help each other out and we grow. It doesn't matter. I'm just trying to put perspective into this for everybody. But those of you who just joined, this is my partner, Kelly. He is Arsenic. He's the one I was telling you about that's putting out the EP. So support him. Join his stuff. He's going to be awesome. I said if anybody knew how to do this and make this happen for you, to reach out to you. So hopefully if some of my viewers send you messages, it's because I gave them the message to help you. So that's
Thank you very much. Yeah. No, tomorrow is the first teaser of the EP. The EP won't come out till end of November. Sure. I thought that Black Friday sounds cool, so I figured,
that's what I saw.
Friday, let's do that. It's black.
Right. Yeah. So that's it. So yeah, and it's kind of, it's unfortunate, guys. I waited for Kelly to come on. He sent me a message today, and I sent him one back. It looks like we're losing Ace. That seems to be the genuine thing. Some people have already put it out. Jason Hook already put it on his thing that he's heard that he's already passed. So the world lost a rock legend today in Ace Frehley. Obviously, I'm a huge Kiss fan. Kelly is too. It's just kind of weird. I was thinking about this on the drive home, right? And people's, when you talk about great guitarists, Ace was never in that mix, right? You talk about like your greatest, Hendrix and Steve Vai, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Eddie Van Halen, maybe he's in a top 50 list or maybe in a top 100 list. So as far as guitarist goes, he's never put in that. But if you were to put the top 10 musicians that influenced a genre, he is in that top 10 1,000%. So maybe he wasn't the greatest guitarist on the face of the earth, right? But what his influence did for hard rock and heavy metal is he's definitely top 5 in that conversation. There's nobody else that can be put in there. So his legacy, I think, foreshadows his guitar playing and maybe his ability, but what he did for the genre and what he did for musicians now, I don't know if there is a living person now that could say they did that same kind of thing for their genre. I would have said Ozzy, he's past Ace, he is definitely there. So Kelly, give us your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you in terms of technical ability. Ace Frehley might not have been sort of the best, but as we know, technical ability is not really where music lies. That lies more in the classical realm of things, but in the scene where we're surrounded, it comes more down to the emotion and what you evoke and how people feel when you play. And I would even say, like, as much as Randy Rhoads and Dimebag and those guys have been hailed, I think that neither one of those would even come close to being. I think that Randy Rhoads and Dimebag would probably say that Ace Frehley made me want to play guitar, right?
Well, I could 1,000% say Dimebag did. I mean, he's got Ace tattooed on his chest.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I'm saying. Is that it to some guitar players, it doesn't come down to technical ability. There are some that can combine the two, and Randy Rhoads did that, Dimebag did that, Eddie Van Halen did that, or whatever, right? But when Ace did what he did in 1973 onwards, type of thing, like it was like a generation that said, I want to be Ace. So in many people's books, no matter what the technical ability is, Ace is on many lists number one. I think it's like, this is the guy that wanted me, that made me want to play guitar.
What's up, Ellie? And so I think it's kind of tough because, like, we're fans of the genre of like hard rock and heavy metal, but I don't think personally that there is a band that did more for the genre than Kiss did, as far as getting people who were non-metal fans into this realm, right? It's a hard thing to explain, but what Kiss did for the music industry is really never talked about as much as it should be, as far as making a lifestyle out of a particular music, right? That I think goes very understated for Kiss.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, we have a bit of a difference here. I mean, we can say Black Sabbath on one end, having invented basically heavy metal, and then Kiss inventing the heavy metal theatrics. Although the theatrics, the makeup and stuff, we talked about this at length before, that was sort of preceded by other bands that did the same. But I think that what really turned into the metal theatrics as we know it was the mix of those two. It was taking the doom and gloom and the occult dark themes of Black Sabbath and the heaviness of it, and mixing it with the theatrics. Because let's face it, I mean, Kiss was a pretty light rock and roll band, when push comes to shove, right? But it was combining those two, like the flames and the blood spewing and all that stuff, and mixing it with the doom and gloom of Black Sabbath. Because I mean, we look at Black Sabbath up until 77 or whatever, they still looked like hippies, like that. They were basically almost like a psychedelic hippie band that were making songs about smoking weed and, sorry, maybe I blocked the stream here. But you know what I mean, right? So I think that the combination of those two is really what made, the metal thing as it is. And, we see some early examples. Judas Priest, to some extent, did a bit of that. But obviously, Rob mixed in some of the underground culture that he was involved with as well into that whole thing. So, Between those three, I would put Judas Priest in that mix.
Yeah, so
Um,
I would put like, for like heavy metal, yes, but I would say music in general. How many people saw a Kiss album for the first time and just played it because it looked cool? They didn't know what the music was, right? They just put it on. You look at Black Sabbath's first album and you're like, oh, I wouldn't listen to this, right? If I saw that in a record store. But you see like Kiss Destroyer, you're picking that album up, right? You're going to hold it, and you're going to look at it, you're going to see it. And you would take a
mhm.
chance on something like that, right? You might not like every Kiss song. You might think they suck. But you can't deny the fact of what they did for music as a whole, not just for hard rock and heavy metal, but like music in general. And I think it just goes very understated. A lot of press gets put in the Elvis and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and stuff like that. But Kiss is one of those bands that bridged that gap for a lot of people. They made rock and roll cool, right? There have been rock bands
Yeah.
before Kiss, and there are a lot of rock bands after Kiss. But Kiss made that genre cool. People wanted to be, they knew what Kiss was, right? They knew the makeup, they knew the songs, they knew, and a lot of the times where you might have had a hippie kid in school might have been like, I listen to Kiss, and you'd have a jock that say, oh, I listen to Kiss, right? They kind of unified a lot of the embodiment of music in a way that no other band or artist has done, and maybe ever.
Yeah, and I would say that that they went back to doing the Elvis thing. I mean, we've talked about Elvis too being a huge influence, right? So bands had gone from being a full spectrum type of thing, a full spectrum experience. Like it turned into, because of the sentiment of the time, that it was mostly about the music, and
Mhm.
we make great music, and people have an
Thanks,
experience,
Jesse.
and they take their drugs or whatever to, in
Right.
order to experience it properly, right? They didn't need so much the visuals or whatever, right? But with Elvis, obviously he was a good-looking guy, and he had a stage show, and he, did his whatever, right? And I think that that's what Kiss brought back to it, is that they took their showmanship back from just like, we're not just gonna stand here on stage and play music, we're gonna put on
Right.
a show for you guys. Um, and that is why sort of the Alive album and so on had to be re-recorded and tricked into like
Yeah.
because when they were playing live, they were putting on a show, right? And I think that is one of the main contributions too, is that it was a full-on sensory spectral, not just visual, not just auditory, not it was all of it. It was like it was an overload for the senses, which is what
Sure.
people responded to, I think, and that it was the most extreme thing that people had seen at the time. Even though, yes, Iggy Pop cut himself, and yes, there were people
Hmm.
with more outrageous costume, but the total package, along
Yeah.
with like the most hooky freaking songs you can imagine, because let's face it, they're really hooky pop
Yeah, they're
rock
catchy,
songs,
right?
right?
Yeah, that's awesome, right? That's
So
the.
with loud guitars,
Yeah.
like they're pop songs with loud guitars. So it was a full on sensory overload type thing that couldn't be ignored. And Ace is definitely part of that, and his
Absolutely.
contribution, it cannot be understated. And
Sure.
I also think that the legacy of Kiss is overshadowed by, as we all know, the past 30, 40 years of greed from mainly Gene, I would say, with
Sure.
Paul going along with it, and Ace being resistant to it. Like Ace didn't really want to have part of that whole thing. He's like,
Right.
you guys are full of shit, going back
Yeah.
to probably the end of the era when they ended things on a bad note. But still, it was like I still feel like Ace genuinely thought that you guys are pursuing fame instead of wanting to play rock and roll, and I want to play the rock and roll, and you don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah.
So,
I,
but that
and the
was the
thing
plan
too
all
is
along
like,
from the beginning.
right.
Let's also make that
Yeah.
clear that the plan of
Sure.
Kiss from the
And
beginning was, we want to make
right.
this a band that makes money.
Yeah, and the thing with Ace too is that like I don't know the guy. I don't know what his thought process was. I don't, we read the stories like everybody else does. But when you get in a band, some guys can handle the fame and they can embrace it and some guys can't. he might have been one of those guys that just like, I don't want to do this. Like, I've done everything I can for you guys. I don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to tour like crazy. I don't want to. I've made my money. I'm happy with the music I made. Let's make music. And they're like, no, let's do this. Let's, so we don't know, right? Because, I mean, another thing too that Kiss doesn't really get the credit for too is, bands in cinema, right? I mean, making movies about your band and being superheroes and comic books, right? Nobody's ever done that before, Kiss, right? I mean, Elvis made movies. Don't get me wrong; he was a movie star, and he made
Ramones.
rock, stuff like that. And Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin made movies, and they were singers and stuff like that. But you never had a band make a movie about themselves, starring in the movie about them. No one had ever done that, right? Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin played characters in a movie. They weren't Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin in a movie. Elvis wasn't Elvis in a movie. He was, somebody else. Kiss was Kiss in their own movie, right? They
That's
played
true.
themselves as Kiss. So I think what they did for cinema and all the movies they've starred in, right? I mean, let's face it, the Detroit Rock City was made about a bunch of high school kids trying to go see Kiss in Michigan, right? They wanted to go to Cobo Hall, right? Kiss was in the movie. But how many appearances in other movies has Gene, Paul, and Ace made, right? They've been in a ton of movies, more than any other rock band probably ever. So, you got to give the credit where credit's due. And if it wasn't for those four guys willing to put themselves out there, what would we have? We might not have, bands in movies, right? Like, Rammstein was in Double X. That was the big one at the beginning of the scene. Rammstein's concert. But Cannibal Corpse and Ace Ventura, right? People laugh at that, but you wouldn't have had that happen if Kiss didn't make the movie about themselves in a movie.
Yeah, and the other example that I think of is Ramones in Rock and Roll High School, which was
Right.
all about going to a Ramones concert.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
as opposed to Detroit Rock City, it was the actual Ramones, at the time. But anyway, yeah, I totally see what you're saying. But obviously Ace became a problem. I mean, let's not beat around the bush. Like he was a heavy alcoholic, which may or may not. I don't know this story, very deeply, but it may or may not have something to do with the fact that he felt like, he was just sort of a sidekick now. He was a sideshow, and he wasn't fired or he couldn't leave because he was too much good money, and he was too important of a part of the branding because people still loved freaking Ace, right? And even after the solo albums, and there's the eternal argument whether Ace's or Paul's solo album is better than the other. I'm a Paul fan in that camp, but it's a close race.
And the thing is that
he was a very important asset, and he was arguably after Gene, he was arguably the most bankable figure, right? I mean, Paul sang, but he just had a freaking star in his eye, like whatever, and a bear skin on his chest.
Yeah, but, and they all worked off of each other, right? Like when you look at a group and you look at bands that play together and kind of do stuff, Kiss did things that were, very unseen in the music business, right? Having a guitarist and a bassist sing the songs together, that they harmonized. Gene would sing half the songs. Paul would sing half the songs. Ace and Pete would do backing vocals, right? Like, you never really had that before. A singer sang, a backup would be backup. You never had a singer step away and then have another musician come in and sing the songs just like he did, right? Gene sang 4 or 5 songs every concert by himself, right? He was the lead singer and Paul was the backing vocal. And a lot of the times Paul was the singer and Gene was the backing, but they could intertwine. A lot of bands never had that before. So, uniqueness in what they did. And then again, putting the makeup on, whether you like it or not, was something that, we argue all the time, right? Who was the first one to do it, right? There had been people that put on paint before and they haven't. But the way that they did it, nobody else had done it the way that they did. Pristine, looks good. I mean, they did makeup right, and they were the first ones to do it right.
I would in that argument also say that they were the first ones to completely conceal their identities very carefully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? The previous people that did makeup or whatever, they didn't really conceal who they were. They,
Mhm.
like they still walked out in the street and they got their pictures taken or whatever. But Kiss really did not get their pictures taken without makeup. Close
Mhm.
enough. There, I've seen some groupie photos or whatever when some of them,
Yeah, it's peeling
some of the
off. Yeah,
smooching had taken some of the makeup off, but you still wouldn't be able to tell what they looked like without.
right.
So I would say that that is another part of legacy that's that was it continues to this day. Like Ghost, for example, like when he was taken to court, he didn't worry so much about losing millions of dollars. He was more worried about,
Right.
oh shit, people are gonna find out my actual real name now. The mystery is gone. Or Sleep Token, for that matter, like or Imperial Triumphant, or any of those bands that is like you can't see who they are, and if they would go out in public, you wouldn't know who was a member of that band. So they started that whole sort of mystique of who's actually in the band and playing.
Okay, so Mark said he says I'm a metalhead and I never listened to Kiss ever. Can you
Mhm.
kindly tell me what influence they had? So if you're a metalhead, I'll make it as simple as I can, right? So I will say this. Just look at a band like Pantera that had covered Kiss songs and basically idolized Kiss. Dime is buried in a Kiss coffin, right? It's the influence they had on metalheads and people in metal is unlike most other bands out there. Obviously, Ozzy and Black Sabbath, like we mentioned, had that, but Kiss had a influence on people that went beyond just what they did musically. They influenced how they looked, how they acted, how they performed, what their stage was like, pyro and blood. So any black metal band that spits out blood, Kiss. Any band that has fire, flames, lasers, Kiss. Anybody
Corpse
who has
Paint.
any kind of technical sound to a added live album, Kiss, right? So a lot of bands will record live from the sound box, right? The sound stage records it. They go back in the studio and they fix it up. That's what Kiss did. Kiss said it's okay to put out a live album, but take it back into the studio and make a difference, make it sound better. And so their influence on hard rock and heavy metal and what they did, I don't think is matched by really anybody but maybe Ozzy and Sabbath. As far as music styling goes, but everything else they did outside of the genre is can all go back to Kiss. So like Kelly said, any black metal band that wears corpse paint and spits blood, Kiss. Any band that plays an instrument that's designed differently than how it was made, Kiss. Right? Gene Simmons had the bass axe. Paul Stanley had the glitter guitar. So anybody who plays an instrument that doesn't look like how it was designed, Kiss. Right? They were the first ones to do that. You know, obviously, Jimmy Page played a double neck guitar, and the guys in Cheap Trick played, the 8 neck guitar. But Gene Simmons was the first one to alter to make that battle axe bass before anybody else had done it that I remember. So anybody who's altered an instrument, Kiss. Anybody who wears costumes, Kiss. Anybody that wears makeup, Kiss. Or makeup done well, Kiss. I mean, that's the influence that I see that they have on metal bands.
Yeah, and I would like to do a yes and to that, right? Which is,
Sure.
like the Led Zeppelins, like the Black Sabbaths, the Deep Purples, all the ones that were playing heavy music before, they were grown up music. They were music for that was music for adults, like it was for kids, whatever it may have been, right? But the cartoony Kiss very much appealed to reading comic books or whatever. It's like these are real life, like superheroes and things. Like look at them,
Yeah.
awesome like, superhero costumes. Look at them, look at them, and all that stuff. Also, it's a bit forbidden because the music is loud, and that only experience of that either is forbidden from Ian or we hear from Paul or Ace, whatever, right? It's very much appealing to an 8-year-old type of thing, which is, let's say that's the age of most of the influential back speed metal band members were in the mid 70s. They were 5 to 8 years old when they discovered Kiss, and they wanted to be Kiss. They didn't want to be Ozzy. They learned about Ozzy and liked the music after they fell in love with Kiss, right? Ozzy, Black Sabbath, Deep Purple, all that stuff came after they fell in love with Kiss, even with Judas Priest or Iron Maiden and all that shit. The first love for most of these bands were Kiss, and they totally acknowledge it without shame for the rest of their careers. So that's also why I think that the influence is unimaginable, just because it was the gateway. It was what got it started. Yeah. And to your point too, it's like that's still stuck in their DNA. So once they got way past that and got into Possessed or Slayer or even beyond that, it was still like, look at Burzum or any of those Norwegian bands. It still looks like fucking Gene Simmons. It doesn't look like Paul. It doesn't look like Ace. It looks like Gene Simmons. That was a bad guy in Kiss that spit blood and breathed fire, right? So that still to this day in Corpse Paint and all that stuff, Gene Simmons is still like sort of the archetypical metal bad guy, even though they didn't necessarily play metal. We talked about this before, like the 3 or 4 metal songs perhaps that can be legitimately called metal, and the rest of it is rock and roll or even pop or disco or whatever you want to, right? But just the loud music and the cartoonishness of them was the 8-year-olds.
And so I guess Frank, or Mark, going back to what we were saying, right? Quite frank, if you were a heavy metal fan and a death metal fan and a rock metal fan now, and you listen to Kiss for the first time ever, you're going to be like, this is pop, this is kind of garbage, this is kind of crap. But put yourself all the way back in 1974 when this is first on the scene, and you grab the album cover and you look at it, right? And you might not have heard anything maybe but Thin Lizzy at the time, or maybe you might have heard somebody else that's kind of in the same vein as them. But experiencing Kiss for the first time, before you hear anything else, you have to look at it in its totality. It's the entire package of Kiss. It's the album cover, it's the art, it's the songs, it's everything that goes into it. So you can't just put on an album or a CD and hit play and expect it to be a modern metal classic. But if you reverse the clock, everything goes into it. Look at the packaging, look at the costumes, look at the art, look at how they presented themselves, and then play the music and try to understand what they were doing. It will all make sense to you.
And then put it into context of what else was there at the time, right? Mm-hmm. In the early mid 70s, what else was there? Like Johnny Mitchell, James Taylor, Jim Croce,
right.
Just put it into context how extreme Kiss were, at the time. Mm-hmm. And yes, there was Judas Priest, and yes, there were some other little pockets of things that we've discovered later that we maybe put higher significance into. But once Kiss Alive, arguably Kiss Alive 2 also, right? They were worldwide. Nothing could touch them because there was nothing as extreme at the time.
Right. And also, too, we mentioned this a couple of times that we talk about Kiss all the time, but like, look at the Kiss Army and what the media did for Kiss, right? You had commercials. They made the 5 o'clock news, right? When news meant something, right? You turned on and they're like, oh, look at this band out of Detroit. And it was like, all the eyes were focused on Kiss. It was like, hey, everybody, look at what's going on over here. And so Kiss blew up in that way with the help of media and the help of modern television and things that they were getting involved in. That's what you got to take into perspective from Kiss. It wasn't just 4 guys that dressed up in costumes and wore makeup. They created a movement, right? They're doing what Taylor Swift is doing now, right? They're creating a movement. That's what they did.
And one thing that we can keep in mind a little bit too is, which is a little bit weird to say, right? But in the mindset that was then, it was almost like Kiss were freaking G.G. Allen. You know, like they were pushing the very outer border of what was tolerable,
Mm-hmm.
right? And kids loved it, and so it wasn't just sort of Kiss the band either. It was a social reaction to it that also made it more appealing. I mean, obviously, when we go into late '80s and Gigi Allen, like so many things have been done past that it was like that was sort of the border that you had to cross in order to be considered extreme. But in the mid '70s, that was it was out of line for most of society,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which just made it more appealing, and it really wasn't that dangerous. I mean, we get to Gigi Allen, yeah, we're getting into
Yeah,
really
I mean,
dangerous
right.
territory, right? But it
And I
wasn't
think the
quite there at
thing,
that border yet.
right,
In
and I
mid
think the thing with Kiss is Kiss had the same effect as Elvis did, right? Was when you look back at Elvis, was Elvis dangerous? No. Was his music a little iffy? Maybe. But it's how he presented himself, right? The sex appeal, the swinging of his hips. Mothers would cover their kids' eyes and say, "Don't watch that, don't watch that." That's what Kiss did, right? When you saw these guys in makeup playing live, a lot of parents turn off the TV and you're like, "What was that? Put that back on." You're not watching that. You're not going to see that, right? That's the kind of influence Kiss had. Like
Yep.
they were the Elvis of their generation. They were let's make sure that it's acceptable that we can do this. And Kiss didn't care. They were just like, we're going to do what we're going to do. And they took that approach, right? When the Beatles came in, it was Beatlemania. Everybody accepted them. But look at Elvis's first couple records, right? When he's a young kid and he had that sex appeal, moms didn't want their daughters to listen to that.
And they also, I think that they knew deep down themselves that this isn't really dangerous, right? We're doing
No, not at all.
theatrics. This is
Sure.
all fake blood. This is all fake. It's controlled explosions and all that stuff, right? And then when we get on further, when people have to beat it over and over and over and over again, and we get to church burnings, and we get to Gigi Allen, and we get to all that stuff, then all of a sudden, to push the boundaries, that it actually gets to being dangerous. But I think that Elvis knew, and the Who knew, and Kiss knew that it's really not dangerous. Yes, we're being shocking, but it's really not dangerous. So we're safe. We're cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what has gone to beyond that, and in the past week I've taken a lot of flack because I posted something about NSBM. We're not supposed to talk about politics, but that is sort of the edge of what
Yeah.
can be shocking and provocative now is to go into the extreme of Nazism, basically to piss people off, right? Which
Yeah.
is not cool in my book, but you see what I mean? Like that's where it's gone. In the mid '70s, it was fine to just spit some red dye out of your mouth and doing, what fire
Yeah.
breathing
And,
did on
the
as a sideshow on the
right.
corner street, so.
Yeah, and music and politics has kind of always gone hand in hand, right? I mean, like, let's face it. You had
I didn't
the
want to. I
hippie
didn't mean to
movement.
take it there.
They-
I just wanted to
No,
put
no,
in
no. I'm just
perspective
saying. But like,
Kiss probably
right.
feeling like it was
Yeah.
still safe. It was really
Yeah.
not that
And-
bad as they
right,
were made
and
out
that's
to
the
be.
thing, right? The movement always goes, but I think when a band becomes so bigger than politics, that's when they like Kiss. Nobody cared at that time about Nixon, and they wanted to see Kiss, right? They weren't watching this stuff. Kiss took over the world, literally,
Kiss
and
didn't-
no other band has been able to do that really ever. Kiss I mean, if you would have put Kiss in Congress and had them run for president, they would have won as a band, right? That's just how politically influenced they were, but they had influenced the entire world. It wasn't just the United States. This was a cultural phenomenon. People in Australia and Japan and Europe were all wearing Kiss makeup. They literally took over the world. There really has never been a band that has done that in terms of a movement. And it was cool to be part of the Kiss Army because it was Kiss Army Australia, Kiss Army Canada, Kiss Army Mexico, Kiss Army Brazil. It wasn't a fact that it was a culture and a country. You all united over one band, which was Kiss. And it was incredible. It was the coolest thing to see.
Kiss Army is arguably the first Swifty type organization, right?
That's what it was. That was it,
But
right?
but also let's be fair here. Christine, they were bordering on some pedo stuff there that was a little bit suspicious
Yeah, I
lyrically,
mean,
right?
sure,
So let's
you
not
know,
entirely
and
whitewash them as super innocent,
no,
but
but I think overall,
whatever.
right, when you look at the aspect of like everything that was happening, at the time, and
Nico.
like I said, we're looking at it from a 2025 perspective, talking about Kiss. Turn back the clock to 1973, right, when Kiss first starts coming up. I wasn't alive, so I don't know what it was
It's
like, right? I don't know what the movement was. People
it's
that are there can
it's like
explain it, but like,
the Disney Plus disclaimer. It was not okay then. It's not okay now. But it's a reflection of the environment as it was then, and
right.
let's keep it there for observation and the reflection of what society was like and what we can aspire to be. So I'm
Yeah.
kind of sort of
And
cool with that.
yeah, and again too, right? I mean, look at all the bands over the course of the decades that have split apart and kind of Kiss had some other characters come in, right? Other musicians join them, but as a whole, they never really deviated from Kiss, right? So yeah, they did the Unmasked in the '80s when it was cool to be a band, right? They put on the leopard print and they wanted to be, the eight. But as soon as that died out, they were easily able to transition back into Kiss again. Like, oh, that was just a time in our lives where we just wanted to experiment, right? Like anything else. But what they did from that point on, when they put the makeup back on in the '90s and then went on tour from basically '92 all the way until now, they never deviated from Kiss. Like it's always been that spectacle of a stage show. Their live albums show it. So I don't know if any band had the staying power that Kiss did for as long as they did.
Yeah, I mean, we have to go to bands like the Stones or whatever, right?
Yeah, they're
To get to that. So
like I could see, one band I will say that kind of had songs in a lot of the decades that carried on were Aerosmith, right? They kind of
yeah,
transitioned themselves from the '70s to the '80s to the '90s. Then they made that ballad love song with Steven Tyler's daughter in the movie with Space, right? And then a whole new generation caught on with Kiss, right? Queen kind of did it until Freddie died. The legacy kind of continued on. But I mean, like as far
the
as a
Rolling
group,
Stones, like I said,
that never, yeah, and has never really changed though is Kiss, right? They're kind of the staple of like when you look back at Kiss 1973 and you look back at Kiss now, it's like the only thing that changed is their age, right? And how the songs have stayed the same. The stage shows have gotten better and they've just grown into what they are now. And then the cool thing about Kiss is even Gene said, when we're gone, you could have another four people put on the makeup and be Kiss all over again for the next 50 years.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Right?
And
It
I think
doesn't
that they're
matter
doing the
who's in
same.
the band at that point.
I think they're doing the same thing that ABBA did. It's like, the ABBA have like a hologram show as a standing
Hmm.
thing in the UK. People can go into like a theater and see ABBA live in their
Yeah.
prime, and they think that it's like a show that they would
Right.
have put on. So Kiss can totally do
You
that
know,
if they haven't already.
yeah. And like I said,
Um,
they don't even need to because you could take four teenage kids that are awesome musicians and put Kiss makeup on them and say they're the new Kiss or the Kiss Next Generation or Kiss Squared, right? And now they're still playing the same songs, wearing the same makeup. It's just another generation gets to experience just different people doing it. But we've already done that with Tommy Thayer, and we've done it now with Eric Carr, and all the other people that have been in Kiss that have donned the makeup. You know, we've experienced it already, so it's nothing new, right? So if Gene and Paul say, "Listen, the next two guys that are going to be, Gene and Paul, right, that are going to be the Demon and the Star Child," well, you just have two guys that wear the makeup that are great musicians and they sing the songs.
Granted, though, you'd have to look a long time, I think, to find someone that sounds like Paul Stanley. It's a very unique
Sure,
voice.
but
But
his kids
but
doing
but
it,
that's
right?
not impossible,
So
and you could
I
lip
mean,
sync too. Fine,
and it's crazy, but Gene Simmons' kid and Paul Stanley's kid do acoustic stuff on Instagram all the time together.
Oh,
They're phenomenal musicians. It's very unique to see them sing. They don't sing Kiss songs, they sing like covers of stuff. But if you were to listen to them play, they could easily be their dads and live this all over again. And
that's
I think
cool.
they're in their 20s. So yeah, so you
So
know,
I have a hot tip for you. Annually at the Liars Club here in
yeah,
Chicago, they have an annual Kiss karaoke night, and it's coming up pretty
okay.
soon. I'll keep you posted, but
Yeah,
you should
send me
go.
the dates. I'd love to
I
do
was
that.
there last year. You get free makeup too. Like you just have to point. You go to a
Yeah,
makeup station. You point at someone, and they say, "The 1973 Paul Stanley, gotcha." Whatever, right?
right.
And yeah, and it's just people, having a few
Sure.
drinks and doing Kiss karaoke. So you should
Yeah.
go. It was a great time
That's
last
awesome.
year.
I'd love to do that. Yeah. And
I'll,
so,
I'll,
like I
I'll
said, I've been fortunate enough to see Kiss, 3 times.
oh yeah.
And every time they've gotten better and better and better. And one of the best times I saw them was when they actually had the 4 guys back in the band when Poison opened for them. I actually got to see Ace, Peter, Gene, and Paul together, which
Oh,
was
nice.
really unique to see. It was I think it was 2006 when they reunited for that tour. It was very short lived. They only played like 25 shows in every major city. Chicago happened to be one of them, but it was the original 4 guys. It was really cool to see because it was Kiss as I knew Kiss. It wasn't a fill in. It wasn't, and nothing wrong with Eric Carr and Tommy Thayer and the other guys that had played with them, right? But it was cool to see the 4 guys back and to see Peter behind the kit and Ace with the guitar was really something to see. So that was one of my favorite concert moments.
Yeah, yeah. I'm jealous. I've never seen them in any way, shape, or form.
Kiss one album, so it's kind of hard to, if you're are we talking studio album or live album? Because Kiss has both. Um,
I would say Kiss Alive. Maybe Kiss
that's what
Alive
I would
2.
say.
You
Um,
know, because it's kind of a best of album. It's a little bit of a cop out, but they're also kind of studio albums because they,
right.
did a mix of
Um,
live performance and studio
yeah.
performance to
So
make them.
studio album, it's hard not to pick Destroyer. I think is probably the one that would be
It's a
the one
standard.
that everybody kind of knows most of the songs on that. Dress to Kill is another one. There's a lot of bigger songs on there that you would recognize as a Kiss fan, and it's really cool to see them in the suits with the makeup on. It's a really kind of a unique album cover because they kind of poked fun at the modeling world, right? Because they wore Armani suits and they were in their makeup. They did it. So there's a couple. I would say Destroyers probably. If I was going to pick one studio album, I would say that.
I I would say, and this may be a little bit controversial, because let's face it, like this is early
Yeah.
'70s when
Right.
studio sound was dry. It was
Yeah.
not big. It was not reverberated. Like so the sound is entirely different, right? I
Yeah.
would say start with the first album, just
Yeah.
because it's the start. Great freaking songs,
Right.
really awesome songs. Start there and then go to the second album after that, and then the third one, and you
Yeah.
kind of feel the progression there too, and to
That
get a
makes
sense
sense.
of what it's all about. But I really think that my favorite album is Dress to Kill, to your point. But I think to get started, why not start at the start? Because it's a great
Right.
freaking start to me.
Yeah.
So I would start with the first album.
Yeah. That's probably the best way to go. Obviously, and if you're not familiar with it, it's Kiss Kiss. It's a self-titled album. It's
Their
basically a
makeup is
black
different. They
background with
hadn't
all
thought.
their makeup on it. And the Kiss lettering is like in a diamond, like kind of sparkly looking thing. It's just Kiss Kiss. It's their first one. I think it's 73 or 74.
Yep.
That's uh, you know obviously as you get into it, with different scenarios, right? Destroyer, Dynasty, you know Creatures of the Night was the first one without the original members, which is actually one of their heavier albums. But Kelly's right, start in order is probably the best way to go, and you'll recognize a bunch of the songs, right? So
I mean, when
uh
the first song on your first album is Strutter, and it's still one of my favorite Kiss songs.
mhm,
It's such a good place to start. And I would say that on the first album, they still knew what they were doing musically. They hadn't found their
sure.
way visually just yet, or sound wise,
Yeah.
like sound engineering wise. But songwriting wise, I think that they're as strong as
Right.
on any of the following 5 albums
Yeah.
from there on.
And when you think about it, right? Like these 4 guys grew up in New York. They kind of got together, right? They tell the story about how they kind of met at the Jewish school and they kind of do all this stuff, right? So eclectically, these guys have been writing songs since they were 17 years old when they first met. So by the time they put the first album out, they probably had 100 songs already written. They probably had the first 3 albums already done. They just picked songs that they could play and that they went with, right? Because when you look at how closely their albums were put out to each other, right? And you kind of look at the time frame of it, right? It's unfathomable when you think about it, right? Because it goes right into 74 to 76 to 78 to 79, right? Like these songs were all written. There's no way you put an album together that quickly if you don't have the songs and the structure set up. So these guys were musicians from the very beginning, right? And it just shows how they progressed throughout the course of their time. But again, as far as, Ace's influence goes, with him being maybe not the most technically sound guitarist, like we said before, but I think his influence on the music world and especially metal guitarists is second to none. I mean, really, his influence goes way up there. I don't know if there's any guitarist around. Like I said, I've mentioned a few. A lot of people turn to Randy Rhoads. They say Eddie Van Halen. But in terms of like what they do and how they play and how they act when they're live and what they do, Ace was doing it before anybody else, right? Most of the bands just kind of stood there on stage and they didn't really do much. And Kiss is running around, pyro, lighting. It was just unmatched. And so I think Ace's influence is probably number 1 or number 2 on metal musicians today.
Yep. Yeah, I would put Ace Frehley as the second most influential heavy guitarist player of all time. Tony Iommi being number 1.
Mm-hmm.
And
nothing wrong with all the other guitarists, right? We're not taking anything away
from
no. Or Jimmy Page or anything else like that. We're not downplaying this at all. But
as far as like you were saying, this has nothing to do with technical ability, right? There are plenty of other guitar players that are technically better than both Tony Iommi and Ace Frehley. They're not the most technically adept people, but in terms of influence, how many people started to play music like them and how many people wanted to be them, right? And once they got up to that skill level, how much then they just took it further. So, I mean, in that sense, maybe Eddie Van Halen is the only one I can think of that wasn't really either one of them so much. He was probably more Ace than, but he was kind of sort of almost the same era too. But because he was still a 70s guitar player, like that's pretty good.
Sure.
First Van Halen was
so like I said,
but you see what I'm saying? So it's a huge loss today that we've lost Ace Frehley today. It's a massive blow, and it's insanity to me that 2025 has had so many huge names that have left us this year. So I mean, Ozzy and Ace in the same year, and I mean for younger kids, Brent Hines is a big deal.
Right. Yeah.
And Thomas Lindberg of At the Gates, it's also a big thing. So it's like some huge names that in quick succession have lost us. But 2 such big names as Ace Frehley and Ozzy in the same year is pretty nuts.
Yeah, it's
it's a year of loss for sure to me.
Right. Yeah, it's very hard, when you try to explain to it because Kiss for me, and we have different backgrounds, but obviously, like I said, Kiss was one of the bands that like I was attracted to from their album cover, and when I put the music on, it resonated with me. And I'm not going to say it got me into heavy metal because Guns N' Roses did that. I'm not taking anything away from that. But Kiss was one of those albums, like when you look back, and I remember distinctly being at my cousin's house. My cousin Johnny had a Kiss album, and I saw it. And it stuck out from all the other ones because here's 4 Guys in Pain. He had Queen and Zeppelin and all the other ones. And when I put it on for the first time, I was like, the music hit me and I resonated with it. And I've never really been able to do that with another band before. When I heard them, it moved me. And Kiss had that impact on me. And, that's what they did, right? And those 4 guys as a whole, losing Ace was losing a key member of that band, right? And us, all the stuff aside from that, those 4 guys did something 4 other musicians really had never done in the history of music before, and you have to give them credit for that. whether you like them, whether you hate them, whether you think they're jerks or they're pieces of garbage or you love them to death, you cannot argue the fact that their roles as musicians forever changed the face of music after Kiss came out. And they haven't done anything before Kiss. When Kiss hits the scene, it changes the trajectory of what bands can do, what they're allowed to do, and pushing that envelope. Kiss is number one to do that over any other band. And like I said, I'm not downplaying the other bands that came before them, but when Kiss entered the music world, they did something that no other band was ever able to do. And I don't know if any band will be able to do that moving forward from here on out.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I know you got to go, Mark, but I just want to
Yeah.
provide my perspective and background a little bit too, because I was not one of those young kids. I was not an 8-year-old that loved Kiss, right? I was listening to synth pop from my sisters or whatever, and cool kids at school were listening to Kiss. I heard them. It didn't blow me away or whatever. I came to realize Kiss's greatness after I had discovered extreme metal and indie pop and punk rock and all those things, and saw how it all connected back to, that was one of the sort of singularities that it connected back to. And that's when I had the realization that, well, maybe I should give them an honest chance. And with that open-mindedness and listening to them, it's like, holy shit, this is good. And then looking into more like, what did they do at the time? And again, like the way I work is that I try to put it in context also, like, when did this happen? What was the environment like? And it was like, that's what I was saying. Like, they were the freaking Gigi Allens of 1973, So not to say that I like Gigi Allen. I do not like Gigi Allen. No, but you see what I mean, though, right? So to me, it was not an 8-year-old blue-eyed boy discovery. It was a realization later in life that made me realize, like, holy shit, this
right. And that's awesome, right? Because Kiss was one of those bands that, like, besides the influence on the metal world and the hard rock world, they influenced what bands are able to do as far as merchandising, what they can sell, what they can put out, what they can do besides their music. It kind of got gimmicky for a little bit, but when you look back of everything that Kiss does, right? I'm not saying that, bands didn't have concert shirts before Kiss, and they didn't have that, but they weren't doing the stuff that Kiss was doing at the level they were doing it and making big money at it, right? Kiss made more from their merchandise almost that they did as the money they made on their music. So they did something right. They were businessmen. They were smart. They, and they did what they wanted to do. And at the end of the day, you got to give them credit for that, because they basically rode in on their own horses, and they told the music industry what was acceptable, and the music industry listened.
Yeah. I mean, we can talk about this till the cows come home too. Because is a commercially successful band, is it a business, or is it sort of a fan pleasing thing, right? Can it be both at the same time? Yes, it can. Like, okay, let's build a Kiss coffin as a joke. Like, we have the money to build a Kiss coffin. Does someone want to buy it? Let's put a price tag of something ridiculous, like $20,000 on it. Will anyone buy it? Like, let's do it for fun, if that's how it worked, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they just did it for a joke. I don't know. And the story becomes, Kiss wants you to pay $12,000 for a coffin. It's like, and then someone buys it for $12,000. So it's like, James probably laughing, like, how the hell, why would someone pay that or whatever, right? But the truth of it is, and this goes for Taylor Swift too. If someone wants to pay $1,000 for a concert ticket, then they will pay $1,000. But why wouldn't you take? It's like, no, I won't take your 1,000. Just pay me 115, and we'll be cool, right? If you're a business person, that's a bad business decision, right?
Right.
So. At one point, you just have to realize that once things go to a certain size, you stop being just a band, and you also become a business that is an employer with hundreds of people employed, maybe 1,000 people employed to run the machine and all that shit. And whatever way
and
to
that's
make money.
exactly it, right? Like you understand
Is it
what's
morally
going
right?
on.
I'm not saying it's morally right, but
no,
I'm
it's
just
not.
saying that.
Yeah, who knows? You know, and it's not our place to say, right? Because I'm not in Gene Simmons or Paul Stanley's shoes, right? I'm not a multi-millionaire platinum recording artist, right? I don't know what it's like. I don't know what's in their head. I didn't write their songs. I didn't write, but what I could see for what I'm doing now as being a Kiss fan and understanding their music and moving on through the stuff, the idea that you still have newer fans coming in and being part of the Kiss, you know, nation all over again, right? You have fathers bringing their kids in now and they're fans of Kiss, and it's just generational. But like one of the things is you go to you go to a concert and somebody plays a Kiss song before they go on stage, everybody's singing the song. You go to a sporting event, they play Kiss, everybody's singing the song. You go to anywhere and you hear Kiss, you are familiar with Kiss, and it's now become a household name, right? Rock and roll all night, party every day, no matter where they play it, whether it's at a concert, a sporting event, a block party or something. Everybody's singing that song, right? Everybody knows it. It's just one of those anthems, and you know they had several of them. So,
yeah, absolutely.
You know,
yeah,
and you know, unfortunately, like you know, Kelly said earlier, the world lost a great one today in Ace. You know, the other guys are up there in age. You know, it's just we're starting to look at the guys that we idolized when we were teenagers now are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. So we have to understand that the time is coming, right? As I said at the beginning of the podcast before Kelly even hopped on, we all are going to face the same fate one day, guys, no matter what, you know, fortune, fame, success, you know, whether you have $1 in the bank or you have $1 million in the bank. The one thing that we can't avoid is death. It's what unites us all. It's what makes us equal, right? At the end of the day, when we go, we're all going with what we have left in this world behind us. We can't take it with us. So what is happiness based on, right? What do you judge success? That's for you to figure out. It's not for me to figure out. I, you know, am happy with my life and I'm successful with my life and I'm happy where I'm at. Do I wish I had more? Sure. But like I said, at the end of the day, we all measure it differently. So like I said, just be kind to each other, guys. Empathize with people. Be nice. Be a good human being. And remember, don't be jealous or envious of what somebody else has. They worked hard to get it, just like you worked hard to get it. Just because you don't have it, just understand where they're coming from and just be respectful of the situation and be happy with who you are, because that's all that matters, right? Be happy with what, you know, if you can look in the mirror and smile, you're doing good.
Don't leave anything on the ice. That's a Canadian
right?
saying, you know, feel like you gave it all your all and you were the best person you could ever be. And then no matter when it happens, you can.
That's it. And just be a good human, right, guys? Just be kind to each other, be understanding, be respectful. We all have one life to live. We're all brothers and sisters on this earth when it comes down to it. Let's just be compassionate to each other, guys. There's enough problems going on in the world. You know, me and Kelly get on here. We have a good time. You know, we're trying to make this live and fun, and we just want to be happy with what we're doing. Kelly's doing it with his music. You know, I'm doing it with my podcast. If you guys have creative outlets to make yourself happy or successful, please, by all means, do it. I encourage you guys to do something that makes you happy. It's all we can do at the end of the day.
Very true.
So with that being said, guys, we're going to sign off. Rest in peace, Ace. You know, me and Kelly will talk. We're not sure when we're going to come back. But, guys, support him, Arsenic. Go download him. He's on every major music platform. Download his stuff. Get him noticed. Get him out there. Play his stuff. Use his music. If you post a live video, guys, get his songs out there. Tag him and everything. Let's make Kelly the next superstar, because that's what I want for him.
Thank you so much. The new single, I think, is actually up on that Bandcamp right now, so you can go get it.
So kudos to that. So Kelly is going to be a rock star. He's going to be famous one day, and then we're gonna ride that train all the way to the top. So guys, follow him, tag him, do all the stuff, help Arsenic out. He's tagged under Kelly Arsenic. You can find him anywhere. Just guys, please, as a favor to me, just go and support him, support the music, put it out there, and get him known. Let's get him. Rolling in this business. So
I'm getting verklempt. Thank you very much. And everybody that's following me, follow Mark. One Fun Guy podcast.
All right, guys. With that being said, we're gonna sign off. We'll just keep this moment for Ace in our minds before we go. Like I said, we lost a hero today and a legend, so just be respectful of that, and maybe listen to Kiss tonight if you haven't done it, or put one on for Ace. So with that being said, guys, we'll do that. We'll sign off with Kiss, and like they said, rock and roll all night, party every day. So we'll sign off with that. All right, guys, we'll see you next week, and cheers, and we'll catch you soon.